It's interesting to be here among you. I told you my name is Judy Ponca of the State Ponca, Oklahoma.
Oh.
I'm a Ponca woman. I'm from Oklahoma. I told you I've been looking forward to this moment and that it's good to be here among you. My sons are here. Where are you? Okay. I got to ground myself a little bit here. So my relative, Tom Goldtooth, called me this morning. He said, "Sister, I know it's late notice, but I'm putting you on a panel this afternoon." He said, "It's with our relative, Ninawa, from the Southern Hemisphere. He and his companion and I have a history together that has been one of sharing our shared vision that the Creator has given us, of understanding how together we're in this crisis of time of humanity to be listening and speaking on behalf of our Mother the Earth, our Father the Sky, to be listening and speaking on behalf of the sacred water, who I just asked to bear witness to these words, in our ways and the ways of the Ponca, which means sacred head. There was a time when we never traveled to another country, another people's area, unless we had witnesses. Like today, my sons are here. Their friends are here from other nations. And at times like that, those witnesses would bear their truths when they went home, to say that we spoke honorably, that we said the things that were needed to be said, and no more and no less. I asked the water to do that for us today, because the water itself has a memory and a life, has a way of being that flows, that fills the crevices, that falls from the sky, that lives within your body and mine. That is a portion of Mother Earth that she freely gives from her breast, so that humankind, so that forelegs, so that wings, so that those things with roots can also live. And as part of a sacred cycle that we began to inhabit at a time that our spirits were looking for form, at a time when our generations before us began to pray that we might come into a natural cycle of being and be part of all that is. And in doing so, our mothers, our fathers, sought a way to care for us. And at some point, through the love that they had for us, and at some point, through the love of creation, a little spark began. That was the beginning of the bodies that are these robes that we wear over our spirits. These bodies, these robes that are made from the essence of the earth herself and the breath of the Father Sky. And so as the Mother began to create us in our first environment, that of the sacred water, that has the same essence as the oceans of the earth. And we began with a single cell, a perfect single cell, That cell began to divide as our mothers were given the foods that maybe their hunter husbands provided, whether they had them in a supermarket these days or out in the wilds. Whether their sacred food became part of the vegetable nation, those that have roots in the ground, or those with 4 legs, or those with wings. However that was, they'd been blessed by the rain, by the streams that had run. None of this is new. The air is not new. This air has been recycled and turned in part of a sacred form of life. This water has been everywhere and is part of a sacred form of life itself. The same with the trees, the vegetables, the animals, the very rocks, and all those things that make these robes that we wear over our spirits, our unique individual spirits. But we are one with all that is, all my relations, mitakas, whatever language you want to say, that says all my relations, which is the biggest prayer that you can make. Because as these cells divided, as our mothers ingested these foods, we became one with each of those things that nourished her, that came from our one true mother that we all share. And as we came from our mother's womb into this sacred world, we went, and the Father Sky gave us breath. And this sacred sun gave us warmth. And the Moon Mother began to govern our rhythms just as they had the rhythms of our mothers as she came into her gestation time and moved that rhythm through her body until we came. So when Tom asked me to participate in this moment with you, with each one of you, it was so easy to say yes, because this way is a simple and clear way to understand our relationship with all that is, with the sacred breath that we have, and why it is so confusing to us as Indigenous people who see things in a very clear way often. To try to understand when we come to places like this, where Governor Brown is having this weird idea that he can buy and sell the air. Anybody? How much you got? I hear the rent's pretty high here.
Yeah.
I'm just going to hold this for you, no problem. It's not going to go anywhere else. Oh, thanks. That's that crazy thing they call money that's just as imaginary as that. I got a plastic card. It's so strange because people think there's something to do with that, you know. I could just stick it in a machine and people give me things, you know. Well, that's how silly this all is. Just how silly it is for us to allow the politicians to believe that they have the right to call it carbon trading, that they have the rights to call a REDS program, that they have a right to say how our one true mother nourishes and cares for her friends, her children that walk on 2 legs, for our brothers and sisters that run on 4, for my family that flies in the air, for the creepy crawlers, for those wesa that burrow under the earth, for the sacred water that sustains all life. My sons back here, as well as my other sons, my granddaughters, my grandsons, my nieces, and my nephews, spent months at Standing Rock, because the Ponca lived along Nishude, the Missouri River, and she was sacred to us. And when these pipelines continue to wind their ugly ways through your lives and mine without any conscience, then we do stand up as water protectors. Then we do stand up as sky protectors. And we and you have this sacred honor and duty to continue to understand that if we live in a manner, as our ancestors did, that prayed for us to be able to be here, to have this sacred honor to eat, to drink, and we're so blessed. We can turn on a faucet and that water's there. But that water needs our prayers now, because the water is being defiled. Because the sacred oil and gas that are part of the natural system of life has been enslaved, and that needs our prayers as well. Because those workers who are putting food on the table for their family believe that they have to have a job, and these corporations choose to enslave them as well instead of making a just transition into renewable energy. It's a crime. It's not a crime against humanity, because we can no longer separate ourselves from nature. Within my tribe, we passed a statute recently, and we're the first nation, Red Nation, to do so, that's called the Rights of Nature Statute.
Oh!
Because we recognize that we are not separate from. And within this statute, we have decided that we will take those corporations to court that continue to defile our mother. And when we take them to court, we're taking the heads of the corporation, not the workers. We're not taking them to federal court. We're not taking them to state court. We're taking them to our court, the Ponca court.
Ponca. Oh!
That's your opportunity as well. You vote. Your people make your laws. What would you expect of them? What do you demand of them? What rights do you have to separate yourself from those very things that give you life? What rights do you give them over you to make a decision on your behalf based on greed, based on ugliness? I kind of wonder, do they even care about their own children? Do they honestly believe that if they buy my relative's air down into Amazon and they pollute the Ponca people because we live by the ConocoPhillips refinery, do they not think that same air is going to travel over their children eventually? The wind blows. Is this that hard? The water flows, right? The thunders move on their own. And where they arrive, that's where we get our blessing. Unless they're moving over nuclear waste, unless they're moving through pollution that you and I are encouraging by not stopping it. Yeah. So when we talk about Indigenous values, Indigenous rights, there are ways that we can protect each other. In Oklahoma, we have 39 tribes there, 36 of us from Trails of Tears. Our tribe was reduced to under 500 at that time. My grandpa was 8 years old when he walked 650 miles with his parents. 1 in 3 of us died after that. But yet, because we are all one, we passed this Rights of Nature statute that will protect the rancher farmers around us, that will protect those that are the polluters themselves, because that's how we have to do this. If you uphold our rights through the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, through the treaty rights that are the supreme law of the Constitution of the United States of America, through the human rights that are set in stone, and always remember, humans are not separate from nature. If we have any sense at all, we'll begin to understand that there is a natural law that has been in place from time immemorial. And we'll begin to understand that to live within those natural laws is the only way to go forward. Oh. We cannot allow our politicians to say otherwise, because that's only a false solution. It has no reality based in what is going to happen in the future. When I left home, 2 days before I left home, we'd been in a drought for 6 years, and we ended up getting 4.5-inch rain in 45 minutes. That's climate chaos. We have relatives that come up from the south, those animals that are seeking asylum in a cooler area that have never lived there before. We have birds migrating. We have relatives that are the wings that have no longer lived there. We have frogs that we don't see anymore. We notice all of these things from the time of the mid-70s when our medicine men were telling us it's the beginning of the purification. So we have to understand that Earth herself will survive as she has. Do we want to be part of that? Do we want the 7th generation beyond us to breathe, to eat, and to drink? Those are our choices. So it's not an indigenous cosmology, it's your cosmology as well. Oh. Your people at one time lived next to our mother, the earth, grew your food, fished the streams, hunted, and enjoyed the life that the Creator and Mother Earth had given you. And as we move away and we closet ourselves into rooms, into air conditioning, and mind you, I'm kind of a creature of comfort myself. I enjoy those things, but there's ways for those to happen. If the sun shines, why not use solar energy? Mm-hmm. If the wind blows, let's try the wind energy, but be careful of that. I found out when they approached our tribe about wind energy that it was a carbon credit scheme, that they were going to sell that energy to OG&E, which was a coal-fired generating plant that is right down the road from my family. And that coal dust that's still blowing on the tribe next to us was causing autism and deaths. In my tribe, 600 to 800 of us live locally. We've averaged a funeral a week, from cancers, from autoimmune diseases, from cardiovascular issues because of the extractive industry. Oklahoma has become the earthquake nexus of the world because of the injection wells from the fracking, where they use 8 million gallons of good fresh water and pollute it and then stick it back into the earth and expect her to put it up with it. But she does not. We have had a 5.8 earthquake there as a result of the injection wells, man-made earthquakes. Your governor loves fracking here. I was so disturbed and so sad over at Bonn, Germany, because we had some young chanters there from the Indigenous rising people who were saying, keep the oil in the soil, keep it in the ground. And Governor Brown said, I want to put you in the ground. Oh. Yep. Well, that's an honor, too. You know, I'm looking forward to being recycled myself. That is not his choice. And it's a good thing that this grandma wasn't there. I got big sons back here.
Yeah, you do. Get him. Yeah.
So it's been an honor. I don't have a lot else to say to you. I think you get it, right?
Oh.
I think that we all understand we're in this together. I think it's important for you to know, as well as me, that we have choices. But our time for enacting those choices was about 10 years ago. Seriously. And so now we have 10 minutes. Maybe we have 10 days together. But there has been a tide of humanity that has changed the course of history, starting here in Berkeley some years back.
92.
That anti-war movement. There's been a tide of people who've said, "Me too." There's been a tide of students who said in Kent State, "I'm going to stand for what's correct." There's been a tide of humanity that is more than the tide of deniers, more than the tide of the white supremacist, more than the tide of those idiots that live in Washington, D.C. and call themselves leaders. We're the leaders. All power is assumed power. Assume your power now. Align yourself with the true power of the Mother Earth, the true power of the Father Son, the true power of the sacred water, the true power of the Father Sky, the true power of the Moon Mother who governs your rhythms, the true power of the Star Nation. Let's win this one.
Oh! Oh! Oh!